Garmadon is debatably one of the most tragic characters in all of Ninjago, because the story he has had set for him has been one not of his own choice. He has always been the product of something else. Initially speaking, it was the product of the Overlord. He had the Great Devourer set on him to become evil, so the Overlord had a vessel worthy of his return, but ultimately that failed. But once he was given the freedom from the Overlord, he found himself having to be on the path to sacrifice his own life to save Ninjago, and then he was resurrected once again as the Destroyer, and since then he has been battling with whether or not he is a good person or a bad person, but he always seems to lean into what Harumi tried to make him to be. And that ultimately speaking is not by his own choice. The problem is that when he was resurrected, the bad parts of him were the parts that were given the driving seat. The thing is that he will always be a product of that anger, of that hatred, of that rage that he channels, and that's the whole point of the Oni form. But the thing is that if you look at the evidence, Garmadon is going to continue to defy the destiny that people keep setting out for him, and there is so much proof when you realize that. And just like that, welcome to me deciphering how Garmadon has continued to defy legacy and his own destiny in every single incarnation of his own life. How, no matter what, he has always defied the odds, and he has always truly made his own decisions, and his own decision making has led to him being able to be who he truly is. So let's track back to the first time that Garmadon truly wasn't really capable of having his own destiny, and that was when he was bitten by the Great Devourer because of the Overlord. Like I said, the Overlord required a vessel for him to be able to make his grand return, and he selected Garmadon as the one that would be able to do that. Honestly, the fact that he just waited basically with the Devourer, there's no way he could have considered Wu losing his sword and Garmadon offering to get it, but the fact is that he did wait, and he waited and learned about who he truly wanted as that vessel, and Garmadon was ultimately the answer. But by the point of that bite, by Garmadon's own admission, there was never a good fibre in his body. His blood was bad, his soul was corrupted. There was not a part of him that was truly good no longer. And you can tell that he was clearly reluctant about that. You could tell that he didn't really want that to be the case, and that he truly didn't want to be in this position. Take the finale of Season 2 as that example. He never wanted to fight Lloyd, but he felt compelled to because of the Overlord's overall agenda. And that is ultimately the sad thing, and what led to the Overlord, in my opinion, overstepping on his plan. Of course, the Overlord took the first chance he got to actually take over Garmadon's body, but personally, in my opinion, I don't think the Overlord in that moment would have done it if Garmadon was more compliant. I don't think he would have actually had Garmadon's body by that point in time if Garmadon was going to be more willing to take out his own son. I think the Overlord just overstepped because he knew Garmadon was slowly getting away from the point that he wanted him to be in. But like I said, it goes to show that Garmadon, by all accounts, just didn't want to do that. He thought he wanted to do that because that's the whole reason he felt himself going to the Dark Island. But at the same time, you could theorize that Garmadon didn't even have that thought in his brain by his own accord. You could argue that the Overlord's influence planted those thoughts in his mind, planted that plan. Remember, the Overlord stated that his plan has been constructed over the course of thousands of years. So it makes sense that the Overlord would have had Garmadon think at that precise moment, maybe I should go over to the Dark Island. Almost like it was his plan. But it goes to show that when you truly look at the details, it seems to be that Garmadon, by all accounts, just simply wasn't really doing his own actions, wasn't doing his own thing, and he wasn't really at his own free will. And again, if you look further and further back, there are so many instances where you notice Garmadon clearly didn't seem to want to do it. I mean, the best example is Season 1, where Garmadon took the first opportunity to find the ninja secrets aboard the Destiny's Bounty. When Lloyd catches him in the act, Garmadon notes that it's because of the evil within his veins. He doesn't really act like he wanted to do it by all accounts. He blames it on the evil side of him, almost like the Overlord wanted to do that and learn about the ninja in that moment through Garmadon. I mean, you could go even further back again to the pilot. When Garmadon makes his speech before going to the realm of madness, he says about how good and evil there will always be a balance, and where he goes, that balance can be destroyed. Again, it's the Overlord's plan, just through Garmadon's mouth. It does sound like Garmadon was saying essentially what the Overlord was saying in Season 2. Whether that's by design, I don't know, but by its fundamental core, The answer is right there, and then we can even take a later event into account. Crystallized, we note that the Overlord wanted to corrupt the ninja because it also corrupted the power of creation. Now let's apply that to Garmadon. If Garmadon's quest was ultimately to get his hands on the golden weapons of Spinjitzu and have those weapons for himself with his 4 arms, what if that was also the Overlord's plan in theory? What if the Overlord needed Garmadon to power himself up so he could possess the weapons and he could have the powers of creation for himself? It all adds up when you realize that Garmadon's plan in reality was just simply the Overlord's. And that kind of melds into the fact that Garmadon just didn't really have any free will in that moment. Garmadon never had a moment where he truly felt like what he was doing was correct, and that is why the Overlord possessed him when he did. And I just truly believe that Garmadon just never had a say in the matter, but that goes to show the fact that Garmadon was resistant to the point where the Overlord had to intervene. He was defying the destiny that was set out for him by the Overlord, and that ends the first stage of Garmadon's defiance. The second stage of Garmadon where I want to talk about is when he is in his good era. This is the area where Garmadon, by all accounts, seemingly had more in the way of free will. Garmadon had his own actions, his own beliefs, his own destiny that he was pursuing. I mean, he was a sensei. He was the master of his own students, and he was trying to take more of an honorable path. He never even wanted to commit an act of violence ever again. But Season 3 and Season 4 proved that he had to once more for outside purposes. Garmadon had to break his own rule of not hurting anyone and no combat allowed when the Overlord completely compromised Lloyd. When Lloyd was in a position where he was essentially at risk of dying, Garmadon had to step in and break his own belief. Now, you could look at that as a really cool moment of Garmadon getting back into the fight. But when Garmadon says, "When you hurt my son, all bets wear off," that is Garmadon essentially admitting that he has to defy his own belief and has to go back into someone else's world to be able to do what's right. Garmadon didn't want to hurt anyone anymore, but because of the Overlord's actions, he had to once more. In similar vein to when he was evil, he had to go in compliance with the Overlord's acts. When the Overlord acted, Garmadon had to respond. Sound familiar? And that then leads us even into Season 4, where Garmadon was officially back in the action, but he was also supporting his son where he could. And in the end, when Garmadon just simply wanted to live and wanted to be, and wanted to essentially be happy, Chen ultimately ruined that, and Garmadon had to react to those actions. He was never acting within his own will once again. He was reacting to Chen telling Masako and Wu about the love letter, and when Chen was officially winning, Garmadon had to give his own life. He never wanted to, you can see he never did. He felt like he had to because he was the one who banished the Serpentine Generals when that was the only available option to them. Again, in similar vein, he is doing actions in accordance with someone else. There was no free will in that moment. He sacrificed his life because he had to, not because he wanted to. But how does that lead into the idea that he defied destiny? Well, Garmadon, when he was in the preeminence, he never actually succumbed. Remember, he was chained up, he was bound, he was completely restrained within the preeminence. He clearly was resisting whatever was going on in there, and he never actually stopped. To the point where his son eventually finds him within there, he is able to help his son once more. His destiny, by Chen's own actions, was to essentially sacrifice himself and never see his son again. But he sees his son once more, and he's able to help him again like he did before. Even though this is a more limited example on how he defies destiny, it is still very clear that he did in this moment. Like I said, he was meant to end his own life in that very moment. But instead, he was still able to help his son save the day, and I do think that is truly an acceptable act and shows that Garmadon, once more, instead of succumbing to the things around him, he does what he can. And then that leads us to the final act of Garmadon, or more specifically, the final time where he has necessarily been in the control of someone else and not himself, and that is when Harumi resurrects him. And I've talked about this scene already, but of course I need to go over it again for the sake of this video. But in the scene where Garmadon is fighting Lloyd, he states that only the Destroyer was returned, not the father, not the husband, not the teacher. None of it came back, and only the Destroyer, and Harumi essentially guided him to be this monster that he was being in Season 8. Harumi was telling him what to do, how to feel, how to act, how to do everything that was around him. She was in his ear the entire time, and she was basically telling him that they need to bow down before him. He needs to be the one in charge. In reality, it was Harumi in charge, and Garmadon never really had any sort of power. It was never Emperor Garmadon, it was essentially Empress Harumi. But you would note that as the time went on in the Oni trilogy in particular, Garmadon just slowly but surely seemingly became his own self again. He became a lot more independent come season 9, to the point where Harumi was even worried about him killing her, but at the same time he was still fairly evil and under her control. I mean, when she dies, he goes into an unspeakable rage, almost like the compass that was directing his answers was officially gone. But with that compass gone, like I said, it led to a Garmadon that was essentially angry, and not someone that was essentially controlling his destiny. And it led into a Garmadon that was kind of confused, if anything. He doesn't really stay as an emperor for much longer, and he's so much more aggressive after Harumi goes. But once he's captured and the events of March and the Oni, you can see that he's clearly in conflict with himself and what he's going to do with his own destiny. And again, like I've mentioned in a previous video, his conversation with Vinny absolutely proves that. His entire conversation with Vinny and his whole demeanour in March of the Oni in general shows that when Garmadon doesn't have someone controlling him in this current state, he is very much in conflict with what he has in his head in comparison to what's around him. He had implanted in him that all that mattered was power, control, survival, nothing mattered, connection meant absolutely nothing. But in reality, he realised that he did still care for Lloyd, and he realised that survival may not be everything because it didn't lead to satisfaction by himself. Even though he's still technically the destroyer, he still had those more human impulses that he still had to that very day, and it was clearly within conflict of himself on what he was meant to do with it. I mean, look no further than the fact that the Oni themselves, the ones that are what Garmadon was told he needed to be, absolutely rejected him at the first moment. Omega outright states that he is only an Oni in form and not in his own spirit, which shows that Garmadon proves that he is in odds with himself, and he is in odds with what is essentially his destiny. Does he go to what Harumi made him to be, which was Emperor Garmadon, the ruthless Oni who doesn't care about anything around him? Or does he become Garmadon, someone who is trying to control his own emotion, control his own life, and trying to control who he truly is? It's an amazing idea, and honestly, we just see it continued from there onwards. Fun fact, this is the first time I believe I have outright mentioned the Garmadon comics. It's just something I haven't really gone into too much, but this video definitely does help when it comes to that. There is a page in the Garmadon comics that I think is very interesting, where Garmadon is having a conversation with his past self, and he is trying to reconsider who he truly is. And the previous version even says, "Your infection by the Great Devourer. Did Wu even try to warn you? Is Wu seriously the one you hate? How do you know that that is not what you just told yourself?" And he is in odds with himself. And the old version says, "How long will the Garmadon that was corrupted continue to influence the Garmadon of today? How much longer will he be under this influence that defies his own destiny? And more specifically, does he truly have a control over him anymore?" And I do think that's the biggest point above all else. In that moment, Garmadon is outright saying to himself, will you let these things continue to define you? Will you let these things continue to control your destiny, when they may not even be within you anymore? Like I said, they mention the Great Devourer's corruption of his very soul, but in reality, with all the transformations, with all the metamorphosis that we've seen over the course of time, is that truly still what controls Garmadon? And is it something that he should allow to continue to do so? And that then leads to the penultimate of Ninjago Crystallized, where we learn so much more about Garmadon and his state of mind. We learn that Garmadon is trying to learn compassion, he's trying to learn how to care, he's trying to learn how to be good. Vinny is helping him, Lloyd has seemingly inspired him at the exact same time. He is still susceptible to those things that controlled him before, such as Harumi's implanted rage that she gave him, time before. But at the same time, Garmadon is learning to overcome it and try to be within more control of it. When he's in his Oni form, he is not some mindless brute like he probably would have been in Season 8. In reality, it's just Garmadon with a power-up. And I think that encapsulates the point above all else. If it's just the Oni form being Garmadon powered up, why is he not a raging brute like he probably would have been in Season 8? And that's because he is defying his destiny. Garmadon is no longer letting that anger control him. He's allowing himself to be open to happiness and love and warmth and compassion and all those emotions that Vinny told him makes life worthwhile. But the thing is that he's applying those to the things that were once controlling him. There's a reason why, like I said, the Oni form isn't mindless like basically how he was in Season 8. He is taking the benefits of what was before and he's making them into his own will. And like I said, that proves one thing above all else, that even though someone has tried to control the character of Garmadon and has tried to control his outcome, he takes those things and he uses them to his own advantage, and he defies the destiny that was put onto him. But what do you think of this explanation when it comes to the character of Garmadon? In reality, there is so much more to this character, and there's a reason why he's commonly conceived as one of the best written characters in the entire show. He has had so many great things about him, and he's had such great writing, and in my opinion, this only proves it, because you can take this aspect of Garmadon defying destiny, and you can apply it to him from the very beginning of the show to his most recent appearance. And I think that is more important above all else. The consistency, the growth, and the showing that Garmadon is truly his own person. I really do love this character, and I can't wait to talk about him more in other ways. But do you agree with my idea with how Garmadon defied destiny? Do you think it's something that he was able to do? Do you think there's more to it? Do you think I'm barking up the wrong tree? There is so much to this character that we can consider, and I probably haven't even covered every example myself. But that is the joy of this character. And like I said, even though he is potentially the best written character, he's also my favorite character for this very reason. But that is about it for today, you guys, and thank you very much for watching. Take care. Okay, bye!